in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern, every Sunday, the place to be. All right, click that like button, click the notification bell, share the stream, all that kind of good stuff. We got an all-star panel, as usual. More will be coming in, starting out with the I don't know what the sports term will be. Is this some kind of avant-garde team that'll be called something in some kind of a baseball or whatever? This is the avant-garde team here, taking us in. Got LAR as usual. We're talking about something interesting today. The ideal of post-racialism. You know, the idea that basically it'll be great if your skin color is of no more significance than the color of your eyes, right? Now, let's just start right there. Starting with LAR and then Dr. Thunder. What is post-racialism to you? Is it a utopia or like an undesirable dystopia or some kind of reachable ideal maybe? Like, what is post-racial in your view, LAR?
That's something that unrealistic, unrecognizable, my opinion, because people have a tendency to look for an advantage, and to have something post-racial would mean no advantage, and some people want to have a built-in disadvantage to, feel like they can't, actually compete. So it's a two-way street. It sounds good, but I don't think that's something that all races would agree to.
Okay, so you're highlighting something in human nature. You're talking about people always looking for an advantage, and you'll probably agree to that. Perhaps people are always tribal, and or people are always looking for an advantage. There is an inherent advantage in numbers. People are going to want to team up, right? And in your view, even like you personally, would you even like a post-racial world, whatever you might imagine it to be? Right? Would you even want that, or you're like, you know what? I think I like people in their tribal ways and in their advantage-seeking ways, and there's no this whole thing's not even desirable. Even if you could push a button and take us there, go ahead.
I would be on guard, because if we agree to a post-racial world, who's leading that? Like we have a tendency to let's come together, but for somebody else's benefit at the end of the day. So if we all agree to be post-racial, like the only way I could think of it, it's like being post-heightist in the NBA. You could play center. You're only 5'11". It's like, I know the next team we're gonna play is gonna have a 7-foot center. It's no way this is gonna go well. So for me, I don't. I don't see people giving away their tribalism, their ideas to be that we have something genetically better than you. You remember a while back we talked about race and climate and Kenyans running, Kenyans
Mm-hmm.
versus like Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people are willing to give that up. You know, like I got to give away all the things that we've inherited over the years just to be nah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this inherent advantage, people are not going to give it up. So, and you're skeptical of the whole thing. It's got to be a trick if someone is talking about it. Someone is telling you that the sky is green, and you're like, I may want it to be green, but I know it's not green. And this guy telling me it's green, there's something up with him, right? Something up, something up. Okay, Dr. Thunder, what is post-racialism to you? And did Martin Luther King, dream of a post-racial utopia in your view? Uh, you can define it for yourself and then decide or tell us whether you think it's desirable or not. Right?
Yeah, so uh, early, I have a dream. Martin Luther King, I think, believed more in the possibility of a post-racial America society. Late, later period, Martin Luther King, and I think this is part of what got him killed, uh, started to recognize that that wasn't really the way to access power for black people. And he became more like Malcolm. And of course, LAR's got Malcolm behind him right now, uh, Malcolm X. I'm more along the lines of oh, he's got Martin and Malcolm. I'm more along the lines of a Malcolm with respect to uh, consolidating power for yourself, and then once you have done so, then sitting down with other groups in order to negotiate uh, whatever it is that you know that you want from them, um, and that is not per se post-racialist, or post-racial rather. That's more each tribe, as it were, becomes known and respected for something in particular that they can provide, and they're able to leverage that skill that they have, that is not genetic per se. It could be an outworking of particular cultural values, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're able to leverage that to gain perhaps other things from other cultures, you know. And I think that's much more realistic than this idea of a post-racial thing. And to the point that LAR just made about uh, when cultures get together, when communities get together, it's always for the benefit of one of the cultures above the others, right? That that always tends to be the thing. It's like, who's controlling this? Who's operating the controls? Which direction are we going in? And who is dictating which direction? And when you look behind the curtain in a multicultural society, those folks, those folks are white folks. Okay, the dominant, it's in our country, the dominant society, white folks, they're the ones, it's their level of comfort with aspects of the other cultures that allows them to be either promoted or suppressed. And so you end up with a whitewashed version. You end up with a whitewashed version of the cultures represented. And so I find this to be very much disingenuous and not a representation of those other cultures at all. So I would prefer that we be on Front Street with the reality that no, people are not going to be able to look beyond what your skin color is, but they can be forced to have to treat you fairly based on what it is that your particular community, your particular tribe is able to offer. That seems to be something that you can see with your own eyes. You can test based on the results. It's much less sort of hoping that other people have goodwill towards you, and it's more about what it is that you can actually impose. I tend to trust that more.
Makes sense. Let me say something. Kind of put some context around what you said here, because the reason why the political question of post-racial comes up is because of violence, right? I mean, violence is the fundamental political question, right? That is the beginning of it all. Violence, right? Who gets monopoly on violence, blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff. So typically, when you're going to unify an empire, you're unifying it under one thing, right? But typically, what comes after that is a certain kind of peace. So same thing with the post-racial notion is, hey, we're trying to get to peace here. That is kind of like the goal. And then some ideal would say, well, in a post-racial world with, content of character rather than color of skin, that is a version of peace. You say no. Well, Dr. Thunder says, hey, I get it, and I get this empire thing that someone is always overlooking it. I agree that we can get to some kind of fairness, to use your word, Dr. Thunder, and equal treat of parity by allowing each to bloom and bring to the fore, to the marketplace, if you will, what they got to offer, right? And that's how we will solve the political question. And we will get into the mechanics of it in terms of how this actually works or could work. But I think that's a good context that you bring in when you talk about LAR started talking about when you talk about unifying or coming together, it still is you're coming together under something, and there's one group that controls it. No one's going to give up their group advantage. Human beings are the way that they are, and that you just prefer that each person is free to develop their own potential and then kind of deal in the marketplace. Now, shout out to Mr. Red Pill Finance, I believe, if I'm reading it correctly. Okay. Shout out to you for the $1.99. That's an interesting comment. That kind of came out of nowhere. But he says, I prefer a black woman. Okay. Now that your preferences are known. Shout out to MOT in the building. How's the microphone doing?
Oh, that's good. But this is a new one, so.
Excellent. So first question on the table is that, kind of just going around here. What is post-racialism to you? Is this some kind of a utopia or a dystopia or some kind of maybe reachable ideal? Is it even desirable? Now, we know that the best marketing that it has gotten has been the I Have a Dream speech, regardless of what you think the intentions behind the I Have a Dream speech actually were. It's used as a post-racial kind of marketing thing, color of skin, content of character type stuff. In your view, MOT, what is post-racialism, and is it desirable?
No, it'll never be something that'll happen. Anything that's with our court systems and everything else, it should be done by supercomputer at this point. Depending on what type of justice that you have, like if you have a conservative justice, they believe in not really punishing their people all that much, letting corporations off the hook for everything, and punishing workers. If you were kind of on the left, they believe in punishing corporations, kind of having humanitarian focus for people who do crime on that kind of basis. So we're never going to be toward this post-racial thing because our whole country was kind of based off of kind of racial apartheid. So this post-racial stuff, it's just that you're post-racial once you get to the money. Because the people who have money and productivity have different complaints than people who don't have productivity and money on their side. And this is why the reparations argument should not be in the hands of people who are not productive in general, because they pretty much slander the entire group with their actual ability to not produce anything in life and then want everybody else's problems to like cover for them. So to me,
Mhm.
there's no such thing as post-racial. Um, for me, this is what happens when you got people who are not part of movements who try to redefine kind of what it is.
Mhm.
There ain't nobody who's not a part of any sanctioned group who talk about nothing that's post-racial stuff. This is stuff that y'all are injecting into this. We never said anything about that. This is about a choice-based criteria for outcome-based action because
Mhm.
everybody seems to understand that for other groups of people, but it is not there for actual black men. That's why we need a different standard to talk to just them about their choices with who they're going to end up with.
I like the way you put it there, and this is going to open up the. We're getting to SYSBM and the passport bros, which is kind of in the topic there in the marquee. But what you bring up here in terms of the economics and the class structure of things, you talk about okay, there's a class structure in terms of okay, below a certain line, there's X happening, and when you cross that line, you mention, now we have different complaints, and we can be post-racial now because we're concerned primarily about productivity, X, Y, Z, and all that kind of stuff. So what I want to perhaps say here, and then ask what you guys think about it is this the there's an inevitable aspect of the progression of history aspect of things, and it's moving more and more, or it perhaps should move more and more towards the class stratification within racial groups, right? The refinement of a racial group is okay, first of all you're a racial group, but then further you have to then class stratify. And this is where I believe there may be some confusion coming about, right? Where it's like, well, are you saying are you turning your back on the group? It's like, well, no, I'm just class stratifying within the group. um MOT brought it up, wasn't me, but in the I'm putting words into his mouth there, but I think that it helps to kind of refine things a little bit. But LAR, is this acceptable to you as a kind of a form of it's not really post-racialism, but it's like we understand that class is a different and powerful thing. Economic productivity doesn't really, it's not about skin color at the end of the day. If I got to find the right person to get the right outcomes, right? So class stratification within a racial group, is that a good thing in your view? And then Dr. Thunder, and then back to MOT.
I think class stratification is normal in every group. I think in our group in particular, we kind of do it in reverse. Because we have people who come from poverty to the middle class and upper class. We kind of have a disconnect with some people who are still in poverty, thinking that they're on the same level as the people who went from low class to middle class. So the stratification is necessary. It's needed because everybody needs distinctions. We all, like, we went to school, an A student, a B student, a C student, a D student, or 4 completely different students. So I think class is the same way. It's just, and the reason why I brought up like doing it backwards is we have an influx of people who were raised in the middle and upper class now, who are trying to be lower class, to in some ways receive their blackness, and they're just sabotaging themselves. So I think the class is definitely unnecessary. It's definitely something that's needed because everybody has groups. Like nobody, I can't even think of a place right now off the top of my head in America where all 3 classes live in the same area. I'll take that back. In Miami, in Florida, they kind of do that in certain places where it can be $1 million house next to like, what the heck is going on over here? But that's what part of gentrification and all that stuff is for, separating classes. So absolutely.
Well put there. Well put. Now, technological chaos is in the building, dropping a nice $10 super chat. Thank you very much, sir. And let me see here. Even now, the Russians are not looked at as so-called enemy for the Ukraine war narrative. There is no post-racial as long as there are geopolitical, economic edges for resource to be exploited. Okay, group advantage is not going to be dropped for any reason. So, Dr. Thunder, still on this post-racial impulse, and that perhaps an aspect of it might just be simply an emphasis on class stratification within races, because that creates now a dimension where I can do something, let's say for a particular class, and it'll affect all the classes, all of the same class within different groups. So that will be like a post-racial type of action, post-racial type of economic or political structuring of yourself, and blah, blah, blah. Now there's a certain kind of pushback against this type of thinking, which tends to think like this class stuff is typically, when you start talking class, it's just a way for you to hide the consequences of past racism. And let's talk about class, whatever. But Dr. Thunder, what do you think about this emphasis on class stratification within races, generally speaking?
Yeah, so the first thought that comes to mind, and LAR started to, to sort of, I mean, he was saying this, he said this in a different way. But the first thing is, and BGS put out a few videos over the last, I'd say, month and a half that kind of drove this home. And it's just this idea that the dysfunction in the Black community has basically impacted every strata, every economic strata in the Black community, right? So you have not just impoverished Black people, not just Black folks from the urban centers, not just Black folks that grew up in the projects, not just Black folks that that dropped out of high school or whatever, not just Black folks like that, but you also have middle class, upper middle class, wealthy, billionaire Blacks that are engaging in the same kinds of dysfunction, issues with relationships, the kinds of qualities that we tend to prioritize in the people that we select as long-term in long-term relationships or marriages. Those kinds of things tend to be the same kind of decisions, and a lot of it has to do with the music that we listen to, the fact that all of us seem to be more or less listening to the same sort of ratchet Summer Walker, Glorilla, Cardi B kind of stuff. That stuff has a dramatic impact on the entire culture, and it's exemplified, and we see the evidence of that in the usual behaviors, not just of those from lower economic strata, but also even from the celebrities and other folks that even never dealt with any real, never dealt with any real struggle. They always, they had privilege from day one, but they're still engaging in the same kinds of behaviors. So for that reason, even if that's the only reason, I think there are a lot of other reasons. I'll park here. I will say that is one of the most important reasons why we do need classifications. We do need a sort of separation, and we do need at least the expectation that there will be different sort of behavior standards expected at different economic strata, and that might seem classist or whatever else, and somebody might try to suggest that is inherently racist. Whatever they want to say, that's fine. We need more of that because the alternative is what we have now. And we see how damaging that is to everyone. And it doesn't give them an up, because even if they make more money, they're still experiencing the same sorts of issues because of the rampant dysfunction, poor decision making, because nobody says, look, this stuff is not acceptable. I was watching and I did on one of my Thunder Thoughts episodes, I did there's a TikTok video, and this brother, he pointed out one of the issues why it's so hard for brothers in America to see the difference between
You
Did it go away?
Went into a deep chasm, got swallowed up by the road somewhere between Michigan and Ohio. Shout out to MOT. Shout out to MOT. You can pick it up from here. Class stratification within races and these different kinds of political arrangements. What are your thoughts on it so far?
All right.
Hey, wait a minute.
Let's talk. Wait, hold on. Somebody's talking.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Dr. Thunder, we can hear you. If you want to finish up your points.
Yeah. Let me just finish my point real quick, and then sorry about the apparently. Where did I end?
TikTok
last
video
30 seconds.
Somebody explaining why it is difficult for brothers to tell the difference between, and then you cut off.
Yeah. So one of the reasons it's difficult is because they're standing next to each other, and they look the same. The attire is the same, and then also when you ask them questions about the kinds of behavior that they think are okay, they seem to make excuses for ratchet behavior, as if it's a way to protect their future. So if they decide that they want to start engaging in those behaviors, they don't want people judging them. So they're going to sort of reserve the option to behave in a certain way. And it's extremely confusing. It makes it very difficult to tell the difference. I think that's another reason why you need clear lines. You need clear lines of separation, so that you can clearly tell this is a wholesome person. This other person here, you don't want to, maybe possibly they're okay, but if you want to make sure you make a good choice, choose from this pool over here. So that was my point.
Got it. Go ahead, MOT.
All right. So it seems that we are either lying to ourselves or not knowing the history of what has happened here within the culture itself. The lower classes, the ones who talk about the relationship piece, those are not people that are going to have the floor moving forward. The reason why SYSBM and Passport Bros is something that is talked about because it's economic sanctions against a group of people that never really respected well-meaning people, period. So we have all these people here within this space. They're here for the community to survive. That's the only way they can be able to have a voice. Like if you go to other functioning societies, you don't have PhDs leveraging exclusively victimhood, predictable victimhood that people go through. You don't have fake master teachers coming up with reasons to bring uncultured women, traitors, back to the table for you to deal with, not for him to deal with. So we have to be honest about what we're talking about here. It's not that the upper classes trying to act like lower class people. It is lower class people who's trying to pass themselves off as productive people when they don't have the actual background for that. And if you look at Manosphere 1.0, is when all these people were locked out of here. Then there became Manosphere 2.0, where all these people came back in here. The denizens of Black America that destroyed everything. The fake pimps, the fake street dudes, the whole nine. So we got to stop lying about what's happening here. It's not that upper class people trying to be lower class. It's just that people at the bottom trying to pass themselves off as regular human beings because they need the economics of inexperienced men to pair them up with uncultured women. So that way, these men who never had the experience with these type of women that they didn't destroy, they want to limit those men to those type of women. So that way their lives will never go anywhere. That's what this class stratification is about. Because every time you talk about separating, the people who don't bring anything to the table are the ones with the biggest complaints They don't have anything to bring to the table. So they need to hide their collective failure behind productive people. I say this. We focus too much on being a group of people. We need to be focusing on the household, individuals. Most of these people, if you're 30 something to 50 something years old, you can't save these people. You got to start with new equipment. If we already know what the outcomes are with the current level of equipment that we have, we got to move on to different groups of people who are already trained for a specific outcome. The only thing people are trained here for is male usury. And they're going to keep pretending like they're normal human beings until you straight up separate from them, or you lose so much of these group of people that you're forced to separate from them. But I just really think that we're not being real honest about this conversation about why people wanted to separate from these things. Like we don't have statistics and music and movies and everything else. They pretty much said this is your guaranteed outcome if you deal with this specific type of input.
Mm-hmm. And we will, with your help, MOT, uncover more and more of these aspects here as we move along here in the conversation. Shout out to Dr. Ronald Neal in the building.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello to you. So we've kind of gone around here, basically kind of well, first of all, debunk the fact that, it is anti-human nature to be less groupish, less tribal, or to give up the advantage that comes with this numbers thing. So that's not going to happen. And we may be moving towards different political arrangements, but and one may call them post-racial or different racial arrangements, but it's not post-racial fundamentally in the sense that people are going to become or going to really drop racial identification of a certain sense. That may or may not be true, but that seems to be where the conversation is hovering. But let me ask you this, Dr. Ronald, what is post-racialism to you? Is it utopia, dysfunctional, desirable? We can start from there. What do you think?
Yeah, I've understood it as an academic. I've understood it as an ideology, first and foremost, primarily a conservative ideology, one that asserts that society has reached a place where the constraints of race and racism, as we knew them at the particular time, let's say prior to 1970, no longer exist today. Either they no longer exist today, or they are so minimal or so minuscule that you cannot look at race as an ultimate determiner of one's fate or outcome. Okay, so if you look at someone, I'll give you an example. You look at an intellectual like a John McWhorter. He's someone who has been classified as being, a post-racial, person, where in his own work, he pushes assimilation, and he says that the problems that Afro-Americans have today is not that, you have a horde of white supremacists, you have white people blocking opportunity, you have just this conspiracy or cabal that exists that works against Black people, that the fundamental problem is with Black Americans themselves, and that the work has to happen internally if you want to talk about or even see, certain type of outcomes, educational outcomes, economic outcomes, health outcomes, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I understand post-racialism, and McWhorter is one person, and then again, when you look at the conservative movement, political conservatism in itself, you look what the Supreme Court is doing right now with affirmative action, and what they've been, what political conservatives have been doing with affirmative action for the past, 40 plus odd years, is push the argument that that race is not, the fundamental, determiner of outcomes. And from that perspective, from a purely conservative ideological perspective, what matters is merit. They're willing to talk about opportunity. They're willing to talk about character and morality and all those sorts of things. So that's kind of what how I understand post-racialism to be. My standpoint is that we don't live in a purely post-racial society. I take exception to people like John McWhorter. I do think that there is a reality of stigma. There is a reality of prejudice. I think that the black male situation in and of itself is indicative of the fact that we do still have constraints when it comes down to race. When we talk about educational outcomes, when you talk about employment, mass incarceration, so on and so forth. But I will also say that that racism in and of itself is not, although it plays a role. I would say that it does not it does not have the final word on everything, and so I take exception, um, to my colleagues who are on the left, and even some liberals who would suggest otherwise. So we don't live in a post-racial utopia. Now, when it comes down to the class structure, the class structure. I mean, the class thing is always going to be there. The hierarchy thing is always going to be there. It's always there. People are sorting themselves out now, whether we do it deliberately or not. It's just the nature of our economic system, our political system, and what have you. Uh, what we're dealing with is that when you look at elites, at least what we get from our political culture is an evasion of those structures. Most elites do not like talking about class, upper class, upper middle class, upper class elites of all backgrounds, white, black, you name it. They have an aversion to talking about class and class stratification and that sort of thing. And that's a very American thing because apart from race, we have this sense that America is a very fluid and mobile society. Um, we want to suggest, and I say we want to suggest, again, I would look at someone like a Barack Obama. We want to suggest that there is, you don't have a kind of caste like system that exists in the United States. Something that you find, in the subcontinent of India. One thing that you find with Hindus and the like is that Hindus, they have a caste system, and Hindus acknowledge the caste system, and Hindus are very honest about their caste system. Whereas we in the United States, we're not honest about some of those caste type conditions. So yeah, I would say that the post racialism it has utopian dimensions, and again, I don't see myself as such, and that human beings, and I would agree, yeah, human beings are very tribalistic, and that's just a human fact, and the whole idea of democracy, from ancient times to the present, has attempted to overcome um, the tribalistic tendencies that human beings have, but we have not been successful
Mhm.
um, in overcoming tribalism. We've been successful at hiding it, but we haven't transcended it. And so when it comes down to SYSBM and passport bros and what have you, we're not talking. And I push passport bros SYSBM SYSBM. I'm not talking specifically or directly about the class structure, but it is very much implicit, in what is happening. The men who are traveling, those who engage, and travel the most and what have you, whether it's for business or leisure or for whatever reason. You're talking about, men who have resources, men who come from a particular sector of society, and it's just commensurate to where the country is in terms of who has passports, who utilizes passports. We know that only a certain segment of the population engages in travel, international travel, on a regular basis. And what is happening right now is, yes, we're going through some serious convulsions, um, and you're having men who identify as SYSBM, passport bros, who are drawing clear lines in the sand. And these are, yes, these are class lines. These are lines that deal with economics. They're they're behavioral lines, you know, and and unfortunately, with Black people, you know, and this is just this is a historical thing within Black society. You know, we have, because you know, we have a past where at one time you had classes commingling with one another. You know, prior to the 1970s, it was not strange for middle class Blacks, working class Blacks, and even, you know, lower class Blacks to live, you know, in the same spaces. You know what I mean? And that was the case because they had to live under segregated conditions. They had to coexist with one another. But what was different at that time is that you had different behavioral standards. So, you know, prior to 1970, you didn't have a case where it is today, where you had the lower class or lower class Blacks dictating what is normative, what is popular, what is necessary for everybody else. It was the other way around. That is that you were not, you know, if you were a member of the lower classes, middle classes, or what have you, you are, quote unquote, if I use this to use this term, role model, or role models were people, and the small group of people who were among, you know, the middle classes, or that small group of upper class Black people. Okay, that's when we had, you know, this thing called respectability politics and everything. But what happened is that, after the 60s and going into the 80s, and with the proliferation of crime and those other things, and you had, you know, deindustrialization, you just had this total disruption within, you know, Black society in terms of how the classes relate to each other, and you had this kind of inversion where those who are at the bottom became the ones who dictated the standards, you know, to everybody else, you know. And I have to say that, you know, corporations have been a part of it. Entertainment is a very, you know, big part of it. Even, you know, folks in my, you know, arena in academia, you know, they have contributed to it. And so, you know, here we are today. But at the end of the day, people sort themselves out.
Indeed, indeed. Very, very well put. I did mention, let me pick up a thread from one of the threads you mentioned there. Said we were going to get to this passport pro things through class, and you brought us there rather nicely. So let me go back to Dr. Thunder here with regards to the class struggle. Because MOT mentioned that, hey, it's a question of the lower class, as then now Dr. Ronald Neal puts it, kind of dictating, and MOT will say, passing themselves off to be something that they actually are not. And MOT will say that this particular behavior is evident, whether it be in YouTube or in the celebrity world, and so on and so forth. Well, especially the celebrity world, because celebrity, generally speaking, is not necessarily high class. It's a different thing altogether. But Dr. Thunder, with regards to this kind of a class struggle, with regards to, let's say, SYSBM or Passport Bros and the pushback to them, what do you think about what MOT says, which is basically, hey, some people here lacking the productivity, okay, are holding some other people hostage because they have a benefit, and these other people boycotting, whom would be the Passport Bros and whatnot, is, you know, they're defecting, and they're like, so it's not really about some kind of genuine group solidarity feeling. Oh, you know, you're going against your ancestors who fought against your freedom, and you fought to give you freedom and whatever. But what are your thoughts there about this class struggle, and also bringing it to the SYSBM and the pushback against the SYSBM, because that is a microcosm of it?
Well, I think everything kind of starts with those that have fought to gain a certain amount of power, whatever the method, whatever the mechanism, whatever the factors are that allow them to be able to mass this power, they want to maintain that power. Okay, so they're going to do whatever is necessary to keep things as they are. And this is beyond just this sort of tendency that people have to stay the same. You know, we all have gravitational pull that's working against us. And so anytime that you want to make a change, it requires Herculean effort, uh, you know, and uncommon resolve over a long period of time. And it always takes more money, and it always takes more time than you think it will. And so because of that, people have a tendency to want to sort of stay the same. And so the whole devil, it, you know, just sitting around and kind of understanding what the parameters are and figuring out how to, you know, exploit the system that you see. Once you've done that, it's hard for people to, you know, justify the kind of improvement for the general society that's going to take them out of, you know, making the money that they've been making and exploiting the sort of kinks in the armor and all of that. So you have that issue, and I see a lot of these community based, you know, save the community kind of ploys, as it were, as a way to sort of keep things in a way that allow the people that are able to exploit it for their own personal gain. Maybe not even for their own personal gain. It could be for the sense of normalcy. They've gotten used to seeing it the way that it is. If we really make some of the changes that are suggested that would actually improve the scenario, it would be such a different ball game that you know, it would just. I think it would be difficult for certain folks to sort of wrap their heads around it. So there is a fear of change involved. There's a you know, the not just the possibility, but the likelihood that you won't be able to exploit the system for either personal gain or whatever perception of group gain. You know, one thing that I have talked about in the past is, you know, a number of the early civil rights leaders were more sort of black nationalists in their orientation and their philosophy. But as the circumstance changed through the 60s, many of them became integrationists, racial integrationists, because, you know, frankly, that's where the money was. And, you know, and I'm not saying this necessarily to demonize those that went through that transition, but I am saying that when it is, I mean, it's hard to refuse the you know, improving your own circumstance for yourself, for your family, and everything else. It's hard to make people work against their own enlightened self-interest, to do things that in their own world would create massive destruction to their ability to you know, to benefit. So anyhow, I mean, it's really 2 points. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it's really 2 points. The one of them is the fear of change, and the second point is, I know what the system is. With all of its flaws, I figured out how to exploit this system for my own personal gain, or for a group of other folks that are like me for their gain. And so I'm not interested in changing it. So I'm going to say we need to save the community, rather than, and that is just a ploy to keep it the same, as opposed to, you know, propping up those that, you know, have found a way that is that's a better way. So, you know, we don't want to support folks that are saying, look, here are the actual and individuals that, you know, like-minded individuals that want to leave the system in order to improve themselves, the SYSBM type of folks, or that are pointing out a lot of the dysfunction that doesn't help us, you know, continue our power. we're going to demonize them. We're going to ostracize them. We're going to talk, negatively about them, when all they're trying to do is essentially the same thing, and that is try to find a way that actually can benefit them. So anyhow, if that makes sense.
Word them up. Before we go back to MOT here, LAR, what are your thoughts on the point that MOT brought with regards to the people whom stand to benefit, and these would be less productive people, they're leeches, they're putting themselves off as the arbiters of of the culture, and it does beg the question, like, okay, what are the actual productive people doing? Because aren't they dropping the ball in terms of political organization and marketing and all that? How did you get hijacked in this particular way? I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, and then we'll go back to MOT to kind of clarify some of these points.
I think it's kind of like three groups. Yeah, people who are who probably have been productive, but probably been self-indulgent, and then you have people who are unproductive, and you couldn't trust them to turn the keys over to them to make society better. And then you have like people in the middle who they're not self-indulgent and they're not lazy, and they don't trust either side. So I think what winds up happening is we're at not necessarily paralysis of analysis, but more so paralysis of trust, because there are groups along the way. There are people, in our community who we're not sure if we say, okay, if we go with your ideology, that we're going to succeed. We're going to succeed. Like, it's like nobody trusts any group to actually lead us in a successful direction. People who are self-indulgent, they'll lead themselves in a successful direction. People who are lazy, we're going downhill. People in the middle, like, I don't know, maybe they will someday, and another day they quit. So I think what winds up happening is it's just it's creating a bunch of different niche markets and niche pockets where people are saying, this is what I do, this is what the people who are like-minded like myself does, and we're going to do this. And to me, that's, if it works itself out, that'll probably be the best option, because that's how other societies work. The scientists are with the scientists, the construction workers are with the construction workers, the doctors are with the doctors. So they're there when you need them. Our leadership is too symbolic. So that's what and that goes for every group.
Gotcha. The symbolic thing that you mentioned is I'm sorry. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. It comes up over and over in this on this show. But MOT, you brought something up. We've kind of taken it through the sieve here, but I want you to pick it back up, perhaps by articulating what are the balls that were dropped by the productive class. Where do you pick up these balls, and how do you, politically and marketing wise, fix the situation? Because how did your power get usurped by the underclass, if I'm understanding your thesis correctly?
No, they poisoned all the women and the whole entire culture, these people at the bottom. I think that most of these people who call themselves pro-Black are doing nothing but engaging in stolen valor. Is when you steal the actual legacy of somebody and try to present it like your own. Like, we have a lot of people, non-productive, by the way, no historical track record whatsoever, but they always talk on these Black issues when they're not challenging the dominant society. The only thing that they're doing is giving people the ability to feel represented without actually doing the work of actually being represented. And that's a big problem. Like, we have so many conservatives, people who claim that they're conservatives, No live streams on Herschel Walker. None of them. Same conservatives. Tons of live streams on Stacey Abrams. How do you explain that? Like, what I'm saying is that we're not operating as a solidified group of people. Like when I'm around other groups of people, they don't allow their non-productive people to speak. They don't allow they um, PhDs who are actually not owning organization or anything else to speak. They don't try to get representation from Ice Cube or entertainers to actually move their agenda forward. They don't do that type of stuff. Those people get no voice, period. Because right now, 15-point agenda, we didn't take it to nobody. Ice Cube with his contract with Black America, who are you to negotiate something like that? And when it came down to him actually talking to both sides, he didn't even talk to his local people. So it's like we always try to do things in a format that don't work and expect progress from it. You have a bunch of people who bragged on not participating in the political process, but then try to make these asides like they care about black boys all of a sudden, when they were the ones who put those boys in danger with those type of women when they knew what their track record was. So it's like when we're talking about the passport bros and the SYSBM piece, we're talking about a different class of individual who's not bringing the denizens who destroyed and ruined this stuff in the first place along with us to the next plateau of where we're going. It's a choice-based thing, and the people who don't want to who disagree with it, they understand free choice when it comes to women. They understand free choice when it comes to destroying the community, but they do not understand this free choice when it's the type of men that they don't respect decide not to choose what they chose. So what I'm saying is just simply that we know what the history is. There's a mad dash into misexplaining the history and trying to make the people who want to leave this stuff alone seem like the traitors, when the traitors are actually the ones who are pro-black, claim to care about black boys, leverage victimhood, not really producing anything, somehow conservative, but not really discussing conservative politics, not really organizing on the conservative side outside of talking about liberal women. This is where the ball is being dropped because we're not operating in a format that's going to be conducive to progress. Every other group of people seem to have this down, even Latinos. But somehow we can't do that because we're so top heavy with a bunch of bottom feeders to the point to where they don't want regular rational people to actually speak. Because once you separate from this actual group of people and not have to worry about being stabbed in your back consistently all the time, you can get a lot of things done. So the people who talk about code and brotherhood are those people who immediately need to be left behind. We're talking about individual households and individual outcomes. That's the new group. The new group was the sit back and let everybody else do the work while we ride their back all the way to the top. It's a new day. You're going to have to produce something, organize for something in the area where you at. Colorado works fine. And if you don't want to live in the Denver metro area, you could definitely live in Lyman or Pueblo or Rifle. It doesn't look anywhere like the Denver metro area. So you got to have some type of proof locally that you're actually organizing for these actual things that you're actually doing, rather than just cosplay conservatism online where there's no political organization that happens like other groups do. So that's where all the balls are being dropped. And we don't go toward power. We only want to leverage and talk about uncultured women as our power source. That's where we're at.
Before we move on to Ron and Neil here, just confirm something for me, MOT here, because you mentioned the next plateau, and then we have already mentioned prior that there is no post-racialism going on, right? That whatever these new arrangements are going to be politically and whatnot, is still always going to be a racial aspect. You mentioned the next plateau, individual yes. people within locals, locales operating, going out there and voting, council people, all that kind of stuff. And then there'll presumably be a network of these people, and there will still be a black identity associated with it. Like, if you don't mind fleshing out for somebody who may be skeptical as to
yes.
where's the racial component of this?
There is. Like, I don't want to hear anything from anybody's mouth about how conservative you are. I want to know what you're organizing on that side. I don't want to just see you just play in the middle, just organizing accidents. We gotta step up this conservative piece because you can't be on the left like I am. Openly say I'm on the left. We fight for policies on the side that I'm on. People on the conservative side tend to play the culture warrior game way too much. It doesn't lead to anything. Because I'm telling you, just like Rush Limbaugh played that culture warrior game for 30 years, did nothing for his people. Nothing. He died a millionaire, 500 million, but it didn't do anything for the people. So we got to get these Tariq Nasheeds, Jason Blacks, Professor Black Truth, Yvette Carnell, Tone Talks, anybody who claimed to be a PhD. We need to know what side you on, and you need to take your ass out there and prove that you're part of the political process. Because I tell you this, we live in a democracy. You don't organize for nothing, you don't get nothing. This is why I don't organize or fight for anything except for the productivity piece. So that way, the people who want to actually be productive, those are my people. The rest of these people who want to sit around and talk about all this nonsense all day, you're your own group of people. They're not going to let you starve, but you're going to be another group of people. We got to separate from people who don't bring anything to the table. No, it's too many faces out here and not enough substance. So that's what I'm saying about raising the level of the conversation, raising the level of your participation in society. So that way you can get results rather than just sitting on the sideline and expecting everybody else to do the work for you. First of all cards on the table. What side are you on?
Very well put. Very well put. And yeah, thank you. That's exactly the clarification that I was looking for there. Dr. Ronald Neal, just finished here with MOT about the racial aspect of organizing ourselves within whatever new way, whether it's new because of evolution or new because you gotta fix your group or whatever. It may be true that the racial identity will always outmobilize post-racial idealists, right? And you have already kind of mentioned that, hey, that whole post-racial thing is kind of utopian anyways. But there are some problems, are there not, still, with identitarianism of all sorts, right? Intersectionalism comes to mind where, now that gets weird real quick, but still it could start from somewhere, like what are the ways of saying, yes, I am operating racially in the racial reality, the tribal reality, but these other people out there claiming to speak for my group, playing intersectional politics of all kinds, don't speak for me. I don't know if that question makes sense, Ron Neal, but I don't know if you can address that. What are the problems associated with operating in racially, since you have to? There's no post-racialism. How do you do that in a world where we know that people play weird games with this identity stuff? You muted, or think you're muted.
Yeah. So the problem is that you have competing ideological interests. All right, that's the one of the big problems. Okay, so you got blacks who identify themselves as conservative. You have blacks who identify themselves as liberal. You have blacks who identify themselves as less leftist. You got blacks who identify themselves as feminists or what have you, so on and so forth. You have all these various competing ideologies, and each representative of those schools of thought make some type of claims to blackness. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the problems that exists. Because each group wants to double down on a certain type of black authenticity. Like this is what black people need to do. You know what I mean? So you got your black liberals who are in that vein, and your leftist, those who push democratic socialism, what have you, and you have your intersectionalists as well as the conservatives. And so there's no easy response to that question. The reality is that we are a fractured group. We are a fractured group. Um, Eugene Robinson, years ago, said that Black America has disintegrated, and that was back in 2010, and he was correct in that. And you just have different sections, and as I said, people are sorting themselves out. There is no such thing, really, as black politics. Black politics is something that once existed when black people were understood themselves as a monolith. And even before that, when we use the term Negro, we were understood primarily as a monolith. But desegregation and integration, changed all of it. One of the things that I'm working through and thinking through right now, because at one time I was a hardcore black nationalist, and I shifted from being a black nationalist to being a liberal, um, with left-leaning tendencies and what have you. Today, I'm more independent. There are aspects of my thinking that are conservative, very conservative. I have not come to the point where I'm going to call myself a conservative or a political conservative. I use different language for that. Um, and right now, I'm thinking about the Republican Party, thinking about how black men in particular can use the Republican Party in order to benefit themselves in ways in which black men have not benefited from their affiliation with the Democratic Party, and that requires thinking about what that would mean. Going into Republican spaces and what have you, and negotiating with Republican power as a black man, in light of all the challenges that we have uh, that are specific to being a black man, and so that's something that has to be worked out. And I would say this: going that direction, engaging conservatives will require a rehabilitation of conservative thinking with respect to black men. You know what I'm saying? I mentioned earlier, someone like a John McWhorter. There are other people like a Glenn Lowry, who's an economist at Brown University. They have their perspectives, and I disagree and agree with them at various points and what have you. But I'm trying to push something more creative, um, and more expansive than what they have. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. So we're not, and I wanted to speak to something that MOT said. We are not Latino. We are not Asians. We are not Koreans. We are not South Asians. We are not um, African immigrants. We are not from the Caribbean. Our experience is unique and particular to the United States of America. It has a distinctive flavor, and for this reason, we cannot use those other groups as an analog. Okay, you can learn things from those groups. We can learn. There's a great deal that we can learn from continental Africans, those who were not born here but who live here and work here and thrive here. But there are real points of difference. The African American experience is just a unique experience in the Western world, and we have to be serious about that, and how we go about doing things. And we have to also understand that there is a division of labor, and that we all have different parts to play. Yes, I'm a scholar, I'm intellectual, I'm a professor. I'm not an organizer. I did activism. I did organizing when I was much younger. I'm a writer. I'm a producer. I write books. I publish and what have you. I don't, I'm not running a 501c3. I have no intentions on running a 501c3. I have no intentions of going out and organizing black communities and creating foundations for black boys and raising money and that sort of thing. That's not me. That's not my calling. My work is intellectual. There is a media apparatus. There is an ideological apparatus that's very much a part of what we do, and it cannot be ignored. I don't think it can be dismissed. Even if you look on the left, you look on the right. But I look at the right in particular. They've got their think tanks. They've got their talking heads. They've got people all over there who don't deal with ordinary regular people. All they do is work within the domain of ideas. That's all they do. What do you think? That's all Fox News is. It's just ideas. Okay, and even MSNBC and these other places. So I don't downplay intellectual work. Intellectual work is very, very important. The problem, and that's one of the problems that we have, is that we have not sufficiently valued intellectual work. And what I'm doing here, and what my other colleagues here are doing in this space, is an attempt to do work that had not been done over the past 50 years. Now, there's another component that we have to deal with, and that's the structural component. And this is a part of the particularity of the Black American experience. Um, Many of the problems that we are talking about, um, right now, are connected to what has happened structurally, what has happened in terms of laws and policies. We're dealing with the fact that poverty is a $1 billion industry in the United States. It's a $1 billion government industry. It is a $1 billion nonprofit industry. It is a $1 billion for-profit industry. Single mother households are incentivized. Much of the behavior that we're talking about, that we disparage, we have problems with, these things have been incentivized through law and policy, legislation, and the like. And so we're dealing with the effects, and we're dealing with the outcomes of decisions that were made, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, that are having deleterious, consequences, for all of us. And so, in as much as I want to talk about individual behavior and talk about personal morality, and those things are important, and you can't get around those things as well. But we don't live in a vacuum, and we ourselves individually do not have the capacity to reverse the effect of the welfare state, to reverse the effect of the family courts, to reverse the effects of corporate hiring policies, and the preferences that corporations have made in terms of one gender over the other gender, and what have you. We don't have any power of that. Herschel Walker was not propped up by black men. He was not propped up by black people. Herschel Walker was propped up by the Republican Party within Georgia. He has been used. White men put him out there. White men have supported him. And they did so, I think, to humiliate, to make a mockery out of Raphael Warnock, and the entire Senate process. And there are deep undercurrents of racism in what the Republican Party did in putting Herschel Walker out there, and we black men had nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing to do with that. And the same thing goes with Stacey Abrams. There was an entire machine that was responsible for her candidacy, back in 2018 and again this year. A machine, a neoliberal machine that you and I are virtually powerless against as a group. So I think that we cannot underplay some of the powerful legal, political, and policy interests that have been arrayed against us. And that's what makes our situation very, very different from every other group in the United States. Our situation is specific, and it requires a very creative, multi-pronged approach to our situation. So there are no I don't have any easy answers for how we move forward. But I can say that we do have agency, and as I said earlier, people sort themselves out. We sort ourselves out according to our interests. And I've said on my own platform, I said, with this Democratic Party, The Democratic Party is averse as an institution, as an entity, adverse to the interests of Black men. It simply is in my thinking, and you have to look beyond it. And if it means that you ally yourself with forces that are also hostile to you, but are not as vicious as those democratic forces, in order to get some leverage, then that's what you need to do.
So that is well put, Dr. Thunder, with the point that MOT raised here regarding dropping the ball, because I asked the question about the balls that are dropped. And then I think Dr. Ron O'Neill has mentioned certain policy outcomes or certain things that some people have put in place. And the question still, the question is, right, okay, well, you need to do something, right, to overturn that. MOT states, well, the ball has been dropped and that's why we're where we are. And it's kind of given some prescriptions with regards to, open political participation, regardless of where you're at. And Dr. Ron O'Neill says we're going to sort ourselves out, but wherever you're at and whatever niche you're in, do your thing. Let's see the fruits of your labor, if you will, that kind of a thing. But Dr. Thunder, what are your thoughts on that in terms of this dropping of the ball question? If the question still is, okay, well, sure, how did you get hemmed in like this? And I know there's more to what Ron O'Neill is saying than just a simple political battle, right? Where I just got outmaneuvered in a fair political chess game. I know there's some history of unfairness there, so I don't mean to discount that. But still, how did the Black, the kind of class structure and the type of bearer or arbiter of values that we would like to see, okay, MOT would say productive class, right? How did they get hemmed in this way and not see because it would seem like they're not actively participating in the political process or not participating enough to see the kind of outcomes that they want. If that made sense, Dr. Thunder, go ahead and respond.
Well, I think largely because Black folks have voted as a bloc for the Democrats. The Democrats are not incentivized to do anything that would actually create any real meaningful change for our community. And I think the strength of part of the strength of what Dr. Neal was talking about is this idea of acknowledging that the Democrats have not been particularly allied and helpful to Black people, to Black men, right? And being willing to at least conference with, having to have discussions with the Republicans to see if there's something that they would be willing to do that would be better than what we've gotten from the Democrats, which has not been particularly good for us. And even if it's for the point of creating a sense of leverage, I think it would be beneficial to us. So even if, say, for instance, that the Republicans, they ain't going to do nothing for us either, but at least the Democrats know that we are willing to vote Republican, as it were, then perhaps the Democrats would have to actually treat us as if we are a group of folks that they need to do something for. I have presented the case that Black men are the new political X factor. And so to the extent that we will begin really voting for our actual interests, and to the extent that we will actually entertain the idea of voting third party, voting independent, perhaps voting for Republicans if they show themselves to make certain critical changes in their political philosophy, in the way they conduct themselves, by acknowledging certain aspects of racism within their party, and making some specific forays towards Black men and our issues. If they're willing to do that, then
How
that
about the local
perhaps would
piece
be
too?
beneficial. And then, of course, absolutely, I'm a big advocate of Black men, of all people, engaging the political system on the local front, because that's actually where we see the biggest benefit of our political action.
is on state and local. At the federal level, the Democrat or Republican in the Oval Office only makes about 3% difference in policy to us, but in the state and the local, it makes a massive difference. And then also, I'm not talking about just voting. Voting is that's that's where the sexiness is, right? It's sexy to vote. Rock the vote, right? So that's sexy, but that's not actually where the real power is. The real power is in holding your representatives accountable, calling them, writing them, letting them know what your perspectives are, actually participating in some of these town hall meetings, and this kind of stuff. That's actually where the real power is. And often is the case that many of the ideas that get brought forward are ideas that the local politicians actually got from some of these interactions with their constituents. And that, of course, is something that people in this system of government don't take advantage of enough. But I would argue that disproportionately Black folks and Black men have not taken advantage of. So I would argue, yes, there has been a dropping of the ball, and I would say that is where the ball's been dropped. And if you just talk a good game but don't do anything, yes, there is a problem there. But to Dr. Neal's point, there are some for each aspect of this process, and some are the ideas people, and some are the organization or the organizer people. And so I don't think it's particularly beneficial or productive for us to either belittle the role of one of those parties, one of those folks that's involved in the process. I do think, however, we do need to have to be more active politically. We do need to hold our our politicians more accountable. We do need to point out issues where we see them, and we do need to, as a general rule, Black folks, Black men in particular, need to vote their interests. And to the extent that we do that, we are a powerful political force, because the Democrats cannot win. They cannot win if Black men walk away. If Black men walk away from the Democratic Party, Democrats immediately stop winning elections.
All right, I can kind of respond to that. All right, so this is what we're talking about. Okay, for Dr. Thunder and Ronald Neal, George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What party wanted to vote against that? What party voted against it?
Would either of you gentlemen mind answering, or I could answer? I could take a stab at it.
Yeah, it was called the Republican Party. So when you talk about going over to the conservative side, I've already let these people know that you're nothing but political saboteurs. It's either you're going to participate like everybody else, or you're going to straight up lose. I am helping registering other people, so that way I don't want these N-words and all these people who's trying to make these sort of changes in a way that's not really participating in the process. I'm really organizing against you having any collective power. You've already had enough say over the trajectory of the community already. This political saboteurism of what you're talking about, like another example, George McWhorter. That book, he's not debating that book within Black circles. He's debating that book within white circles, because he knows no Black person would have a conversation about that sort of conversation when it comes to change the way McWhorter is talking about. This is what I'm talking about not fighting, not playing the game that's there, wanting to play a different game that's somehow there. You have to say what you're actually doing, because the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act has been voted down and against by Republicans. It's not even been pushed by Tim Scott of South Carolina on the Republican side. So We already have things out there. But I don't care about child support and all these other issues that these people talk about their interests. I don't care about black men and child support. I don't think that you even belong in the conversation. You're trying to take hostages. Guess what happens after you take hostages? No one is going to work with you after you take hostages. So you're talking about, oh, well, they're not going to win. Okay, if they're voting against everything that is for black people already, okay, reparations. Who's against that as a party? The Republican Party. So the conservative movement has consistently been the enemy of black people within this country. But we keep acting like, even though we're quote unquote socially liberal, that we're going to go over there and make deals when we can't even cite simplistic policy proposals that are even being talked about over there when it even regards you. Like, this is why people don't take black men seriously.
Yeah. So now, so my perspective actually is, I think the whole thing is hogwash. I think Democrats and Republicans have both jointly conspired against the interests of black men and boys. So that's actually my. So why does
the LGBT have power then?
Because they're white, that's why they have power.
No, they work for it. That's why they have power. They are entrenched in both sides. That's why they have power. See, and like me, I'm entrenched in the left. No one is entrenched on the right, like I'm entrenched on the left.
Hold on. But to your point, you said they're entrenched on both sides, is what you said.
No,
black men are not entrenched.
They're not entrenched on both sides. That's not true.
That is true.
That is not true.
Okay, in Denver, most of the LGBT people that have all the power within the city are conservatives. They always have been conservative. There's really not that many. It's not
on a national level. On a national level, they're not there. You have the log cabin. You have the log cabin Republicans.
On the right,
they're a very small group. They're a very small group. They're a large group. So when you're talking about LGBTQ interests, you're primarily talking about white people, white upper to upper middle class people who are in the professions, who are in the legal arena, who are in politics, who are in corporations, or what have you. You're dealing with white families. That's what you're dealing with. When you get a John Roberts who supports LGBTQ people as a conservative, you're getting someone who was under white pressure. When you get the Supreme Court, who
on both sides, right?
Yes, but the predominant. Their numbers are larger on the Democratic side than they are on the Republican side. So we're talking about white interests. LGBTQ interests are white interests.
I'm just giving an example of people who actually participate in the system and actually get something out of it by fighting on both sides.
We are not them.
We're not even trying. We're trying to make a special aside that, oh, we're black people, so we have to play by some special set of rules. The problem is we're not doing what other people are doing to get their actual power. We're trying to actually put these cultural grifters ahead of everybody else within the movement. And they've already had their say. It's called the outcome of the black community. The problem is we need to leave all these people out here. You want to be a political saboteur? Go sit over there on the right where they don't do anything for you. I want proof that you're actually doing something on the right rather than just saying that you're over there or that you're going to go over there and vote with them. Like, bro, ain't nobody going to mess with that. You got to be able to prove that you're doing something, man. You just can't say that I'm on the left and socially liberal, yada, 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 but I'm going to get something done on the conservative side. They have a very clear track record, judicial and otherwise, that says that they're not on your side. That's why I say, you get the money together first, the complaints become way different.
And this is why I'm talking about having a much broader type of vision. I mean, we're in a different political environment, different climate right now. When I'm talking about dealing with power, what I have in mind is black men actually being over there. So I agree with you in terms of being in the process. That is, if you are not there, and if you're not talking to these people, if you're not pushing these people, of course they're gonna take you for granted. Okay, I don't disagree with you. Yes, the conservatives have been averse to black interests. That's just a fact.
Nearly 100% of the time, though.
And
like,
I understand,
you have to keep that in mind.
I understand, and a part of it has to do is that this one particular party, the Democratic Party, has monopolized black interest for generations. Okay.
Well, the Republican Party has the ability to do that, but they haven't done it. They
but
haven't done it. Actually,
but
they
if we're
vote
not,
against every single thing that happens, and you don't even want to acknowledge that. But you want to say that you're somehow going over there and that you're going to get something out of these people when they voted for every single thing we can have. Come on, man.
MOT. This is a lot of straw man arguments because you've not
This
heard
is not a
either
straw
Dr.
man
Ronald Neal.
argument, bro.
No. You haven't heard either Dr. Neal or I say most of the stuff that you're saying right now.
But that's the undertone of what's happening. That's the history of what's happening beyond these talking points and little things that are said. That's the actual political history of it that nobody wants to acknowledge, but they somehow want to act like they are working on the side that's actually doing all these great things when there's no history of that.
So black men should just stay with the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. And guess what? If you're going to be on the Republican side, go over there and organize on the Republican side. Go over there and organize.
And
prove that you're getting something.
And what's going to happen?
Something.
So what's going to happen with black men staying with the Democrats and, as you say, getting involved with the political process? What's going to be the outcome of that?
Sir, I'm fine. I know damn well I don't want to live in no conservative area in Colorado. I know that for certain. And most conservatives don't want to live in conservative areas in Colorado as well. The point is, you have to prove that you're doing something. You can't just say sabotage the whole political process and not talk about no tangible. Like I said, the Denver metro area works fine. And so I think you don't want to live around actual society, you can go live in Lyman or even other places. But yeah, but what I'm saying is that you're not talking to a political novice.
I know how this thing works. I live in a red state. I live in North Carolina, a red state. I would rather live here than in Colorado. I would rather live here than in California. I would rather live here than in New York City.
Okay, so what are the black things that are happening?
I would not want to go. I would not want to go to the state of Illinois. Okay.
Okay, great. What are the black things that are happening there?
It's not necessarily black things. It's bigger than the black things. I'm talking about economics. When you talk about capitalism,
what are the Republican parties?
When we talk about capitalism, politics. In particular, when you talk about capitalism is connected to politics. When we're talking about economy, economic opportunity, when you're talking about growth, okay, you're going to find that growth primarily in these states, these red states, the most prosperous states. That the vast majority of these states are doing much better than these so-called liberal states.
Sir, you got to be out of your mind. You know damn well the top 10 areas.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Especially in the interest of time, because we're already there as far as the hour and a half mark. But let me just mention something on what's happening here, because I think it has been acknowledged a couple of times by both people, by both sides. I mean, basically, I would take what MOT is saying as a challenge, because it's saying, okay, hey, on the right side, when I see policies, platforms, and people that that represent some kind of a let's just call it, represent the racial interests, right? Represent that, and is contrary to the history that we see, then sure. But in between here and there, people actually have to do it. So what MOT is just presenting, in my view, is the challenge that, okay, I'll see you when we have that actual platform on the right side that is actually black. And I'm just being descriptive here. It's not we can put that one on the table there for a second. That way LAR can get a word in edgewise. I think you wanted to, perhaps you had a comment on the back and forth here that would just happen.
The thing about it is, I think both sides got an issue. Is the Republican Party helping black people? No. Is the Democratic Party helping black people? No. So you got people stuck. The idea that, maybe some people, let's see, when people say people, let's say coon on the Republican side, they get paid. And then when you say people are extra liberal on the liberal or Democratic side, they get paid. But everybody else is not in that bulk. I mean, in those groups. So what ends up happening is, if it's a competition, I get it. I do get what MOT saying with other groups having they're not so tied to one party like we as a people. You know, I get that part. But at the same time, you can't say that and then on the other side say stay with the same party. That's where I think a lot of this becomes a back and forth about, I'm guessing we want power in a certain way. And the problem with that is everybody is not going to go that certain way. You know, at the end of the day, people are going to choose their own direction. That's why I was talking earlier about people in niche markets, because both sides, when it comes to political, can basically say, so I'm going to just do what I want to do from now on.
Here's the
I
thing.
don't think there's going to be a wrangling in of black people in any direction.
The problem that we have is that we don't have a more competitive
say that
political
again?
system. The problem is that we don't have a competitive political system when it comes down to black people. So what I'm saying is that you need to split the black vote. So I'm saying black men. No, and this is the point. You split the black vote to make the system more political. That's what you do. You split. You split. No, you split the black vote to make the political system itself more responsive to who you are as a citizen, as a voter, so on and so forth. We're the only group. We're the only group whose political capital is monopolized by one party. We're the only one. The Latinos are on both sides. Jews are on both sides. Asians are on both sides. We are not on both sides in abundance, which means we are not politically competitive.
Those are my points. Those are my points. Those are not your points. Those are my points.
It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to you.
But that's the issue.
It doesn't belong to you. I've been saying this.
I don't see the argument, gentlemen. But go ahead, LAR.
Yeah. What becomes the issue is someone.
You said the gays. You said the gays and lesbians on both sides, and I said no, they're not like that.
They are on both sides, sir. You just don't know what the issues are.
I know what the issues are. Believe me, I do.
The competitiveness of it is we really, as a group of people, don't have juggernauts on both sides. That's like we don't have the productive industry people and business people on both sides. That's where everybody's political capital is. They don't necessarily have to have their whole group. They don't have to have. They can have a group predominantly on one side, but they have business people and business entities on both.
Yeah, and just a point on that, and then you can continue.
Don't have
basically. I listened to this podcast called the All In Podcast. It's like 4 people. There were 4 tech billionaires. One of them kind of was the first COO of PayPal, and then started Yammer and on. So that kind of ilk of people. One, Chamath is on the left, donating millions of dollars every quarter, to the Democrat Party, and the other guy, Mr. Sachs, is on the right, and not only are things amicable in terms of that relationship there, but also it goes to your point of having people billionaires class level people playing the influence peddling game on both sides in the community, right? But anyways, I don't know.
All right, so I got a question. I got a question. All right, so
I'm let MOT land this. I mean, let LAR land this plane. Then you can ask a question. We'll wrap it up there.
Piggybacking off of that, the reason why those things are amicable is because these people who are in business together, they're tied to their business more than to the politics. They're using their business to pay for the politics that they need to grow their business. And that's what these other groups are really doing. We're looking at politics as to grow our community when other people, they're not playing that game. So that's all I was saying.
What's your question, MOT, and we'll wrap it up with that, gentlemen.
Okay, so we have to understand that other than Texas, there's no conservative areas that are top of nothing within the United States. So we have to stop playing like we have this level of participation that is going on within society that people don't know. Like you could do this in front of people who don't know the history, who don't know how anything works, who only want to leverage things and only want to come in and try to do things in a manner that doesn't work right, but it doesn't work. You have to do what everybody else is doing to be successful. If you're on the Republican side, then you have to go do it. LGBT is on both sides. Latinos are on both sides. The Asians are on both sides. The Jews are on both sides. I'm talking about tangibly organizing and getting results from both side manners. So if we got these black people here who want to do all of this stuff, I suggest that you get in gear and go organize for something on the other side. Because the things that we getting from the left, they're always being blocked from the right. Just like right now, I guarantee you, Dr. Neal does not have a stream about Herschel Walker and why it's a good idea to vote for him, even though you claim to be over there with him. That's just what I'm saying.
I'm not going to stream. I never said I was with Herschel Walker. I never said I was Republican. I never said I was conservative. I'm talking
But
about strategy.
wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. You just said that you're on that side. You said that in the show.
No, that just shows, MOT,
You
that
didn't
just shows
say
that you
that.
haven't
You
been.
just went
Oh my
somewhere and
God.
didn't go.
That just
Oh
shows
my
that you
God.
haven't been listening.
Oh my God. Oh my
It's
God.
like I was saying, your
No, don't-
arguments
hold on,
largely
hold
have
on.
been a.
Hold on.
Wait, one second. Your arguments
You're a
largely
smart
have been
guy. You got
straw
things
man.
going on. Well, hold on. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I will
let me just
replay it
let me
back
just.
on my show so that way we can see what was heard and what was said. Because the
Okay.
great thing is that you got to do something with this. Because right now, after this political discussion is over, you got to prove that you're doing something in politics rather than trying to stand in the middle and stymie both sides. This is going to be the end of this. We already had a 15-point agenda and
Listen.
people grifting on our pain. We're going to do something with this actual power here. And the perfect place to get started is right after the election's over with. You got to prove that you're actually doing something on the side that you claim to be on. That's all I'm saying.
I get that you are for the people, but when you have had these issues before, you cannot think you're going to run people and bully people into doing what you want, especially men. It's not going to work with everybody, and the straw man thing gets in the way. It creates a conflict that don't have to exist, man. So I mean, I get some of the things you're trying to do. I agree with some of the things you're trying to do, but but we've had this between me and you before. You don't run everybody. You're not gonna run everybody, and everybody's not gonna do what you want. So stick to your group, and when the other people don't do it, then you can say, "Hey, that's y'all problem." But ain't nobody gonna ride with you. You don't know how to talk to people properly at times, man.
No, sir.
And
The
that's
problem
not
is
gonna
that
work,
we can't keep having this
especially politically.
back and forth. And the problem is you want to fight from the middle. You don't want to take a side, but you're expecting all this change and all this progress. It doesn't work that way. We've already had enough time to do that. It's time to do things in a proper manner and actually participate. And if you don't want to do that,
I hear
then
you.
sit there and be
I
quiet.
hear you.
That's
And
all
you
it is.
actually,
Yeah, but you're defining
you
all the
You're
actually,
not
terms.
a
hold
leader,
on,
and you're
and you
not a good
actually
bully.
think,
And you're gonna keep pushing on folks, and people gonna push back. And I know you're gonna fold under that. So chill out with
I'm not
that
folding
sometimes,
under
man.
anything.
I'm
Listen,
being
I'm willing
respectful
to
enough to
debate
not
it.
cuss you up. Listen,
wait,
I
wait,
would
hold
make
on.
you fold.
What is
So don't play
cussing
with
me
me,
out is
because we've
going to
had
do
this
with your
discussion
actual history
before.
with the Republican Party.
And you actually think this is going to happen overnight.
You're
You
a disrespectful
actually,
dude,
you
and you act like you're
actually
trying to
think,
be nice about
you
it.
actually
You do
think that
stupid,
this is going to
disrespectful
happen
stuff,
overnight.
and you pick fights passively, but I don't
That's
I
right.
don't play passive.
That's right.
You know that.
I throw people off cliffs and I know I do it.
Yeah,
Because it's
well, it's
time for
gonna
you
get
people to
right when I
get in
see you. You
line.
keep playing.
It's time for you to get in line. Get in line and
Yeah, we're
do
gonna see what
something
you
on the
do
side
when
that you
you
claim
see
to
me.
be on.
You can't
Listen,
force
dude,
anybody to
it's
get in the line that you
easy.
want, because you're not a
It's
good leader,
easy to
man.
participate in the
You're not a
process.
good leader.
It's easy to participate in the process.
Hey,
I
You just don't
understand
want
that,
to
but nobody's gonna
participate.
follow your
You
leadership
don't
because
want
you're
to
not a good leader.
participate. I don't give a damn.
all right, gentlemen. Okay,
Yeah. It's
that,
always
that,
these people in the middle. It's on the right. It's always that.
that was a good way to kind of bring things down there. And I think that MOT, you've kind of made yourself pretty clear, and
Yes.
what you've said suffices as closing thoughts, because I picked up a couple of aspects there when I started asking questions about the platform and how we're going to get there and all those types of things. I think your points are clear: individual, family, local participation in the side you claim to be on. Now,
can I say something?
just say that and your closing thoughts, and we'll get closing thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate having folks that are from different perspectives on the platform on our show here. We appreciate that, and I trust and hope that we'll be able to have conversation that's perhaps a little more productive than what was happening over the last probably 15, 20 minutes of the conversation. In my assessment, there is a sort of framing of the sort of positions or arguments that is not at all consistent with the actual positions being represented. And so in the future, when we have a conversation, I think, it seems a bit disingenuous. It's a little too convenient to paint a picture in a certain way and then to argue against something that has not been presented at all. Even the characterization of sitting in the middle or being in the middle. I'm not in the middle of anything. I'm not in the middle. I have a particular position in a particular perspective. It just does not align with either the Democrats or the Republicans. I just want to see Black men in particular have the issues that they are most concerned about addressed, and they're not being currently addressed. And you can stay on keep doing the same thing that you've been doing and continue to get the same results, or you could at least open up other options and say, hey, what are all of the possible options? Now, if the conclusion is that the only option is to continue to do the same thing, that's one thing. But I'm not convinced that Black men have thoroughly considered what their actual options are. And so that's what I'm interested in, that sort of conversation and perspective, rather than characterizing that as being a fence sitter or as being someone that is a political saboteur. It seems to me that my perspective is a little more nuanced than that. So anyhow, I just wanted to put that out there. I do appreciate your perspective, MOT, and do appreciate you having you on the show.
All right, so I'll go next. I'm doing a show after this. You see, the reason why I'm doing this is because we are playing politics, and you will play by the specific rules that are there. You're not gonna make up your own rules. You're not gonna sit on the sidelines. You're gonna prove that you're on the right. And just like Dr. Thunder just said, whatever Black man's issues are, he didn't even say what the issues are, where they are. No one knows what the issues are. Because so far the issues are child support and women won't act right. That's what this basis ran off of. If you want to focus on power, you have to do things other than that. You have to play the game by the rules that are currently there. You have to pick a side. Your side will caucus with somebody to get your agenda through. And you have to coalition with people. That's how politics works. This Black man politics stuff that we've been doing over the past 50 years haven't worked. The level of political ignorance is abhorrent, crazy, ridiculous. We should be beyond this by now. And of course, you're going to get bullied and hit in the mouth every time I see you not fighting right. But you claim to be on the right, but you're actually in the middle. You're fence sitting, and you're trying to leverage everybody else's actual participation in the process for your own gain because you don't want to actually organize for your own power. That's the problem here. That's the problem that we keep having here. And at the end of the day, it's not really that hard to participate in politics if you actually want to participate. Now, if you don't want to participate in politics, that's the problem that we're going to have. We're going to
Final thoughts.
I'm going to say this and I'm going to shut up because I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I want you to hear me when I'm saying this. I get what you just said, but you got to remember at the beginning of these conversations about politics, you were the one that brought up the women. You were the one that brought up the pro-Black. It wasn't the people on the panel.
Because that's what's happening.
Just hear me. Hold on.
Sir. You're not going to build a whole house on me. I'm bringing this up because this is what's happening. Don't try to make it look like it's me who's doing it. Yes, you are. At the end of the day, this is what's being talked about.
What I'm trying to say.
Okay. Talk about something else on your platform, and we'll see.
What I'm trying to say is, what I just said that you did at the beginning, Dr. Thunder said you basically did the same thing. And when we're having these conversations, it goes back to something that you brought in to this conversation we weren't necessarily talking about at the time. So I get you want to have the conversation, but you kind of created a conversation that we weren't going about and created a animosity that wasn't there at the beginning. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But
the problem is, sir, is
forget that you did.
You want to keep talking about things. You want to talk about things in a shape, form, and fashion that it's not happening. It doesn't matter.
No,
we're talking about a very specific system that have a very specific way you're gonna fight it.
No, you talked about a very specific thing, and you made an argument about a very specific thing that people weren't talking about.
So now you're not part of the conversation now.
No, you know what?
All right, we'll let Dr. Ronald Leo take us out with his final thoughts.
You can't do this with me, man. I'm too good at it.
I'll just say this.
You're good at being stupid, man.
Whatever. I'm not the one who had a child by a ratchet.
All right. Hey, check it out. Come on.
That's okay. That's okay. He don't have no kids. He gonna die.
You're the one who threw shots at me, right? Hey, look. You go low, I lower the shoulder. That's what I do.
Okay.
How many people I gave a concussion? You really want to try that one? You know how many people I gave a concussion?
You're the one. You're the one.
Sorry about that, Dr. Neal.
Sorry about that, Dr. Neal. What are your final thoughts?
I would just say this, man. I've stated my position and what have you. Contrary to what has been said here by said party, we are in the system. We are in the game. We're talking about systems and we're talking about participation. No one here is a non-participant. You understand? And what I've articulated is simply the need to be more strategic, to need to reassess affiliations, and that's all. And to be important to be very conscious of the need to leverage power. And to do so in light of our interests. And here's the thing, I find it laughable that someone could, in this platform, attempt to, police us and somehow threaten to punish us for not playing the game the way he thinks that we ought to play it. I mean, this is just laughable. I mean, we are. This is a democracy. People leverage systems in all sorts of ways all the time. People switch parties all the time. People, it doesn't matter what side you're on. People are always leveraging power for their own best interests and what have you. And what I'm saying, what I think, if I don't want to mischaracterize Dr. Thunder, is that we have to be active in pursuing our interests and using the system in the way that it's set up to benefit those interests. I mean, that's simply where we're at. This is a very, very unique moment politically, for us as Black men. It's no different from when Black people made the shift, in the 1940s when Franklin, Delano Roosevelt was the president. Prior to him becoming president, Blacks voted for the Republican Party. And once he came through with that New Deal, Black people shifted their political affiliations. You understand? And so this is not radically different in terms of you assessing where you stand in this system and making decisions based on those assessments. So thank you for the conversation, and I'm sure that we're going to have more like this one. So peace and blessings to you, Ike, and to Dr. Thunder.
Absolutely.
Shout out to you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, and I think
don't cut yet.
First of all, the one that is on the screen was Mike V that sent this one a while ago, and then now we have another super chat. Shout out to Matifi. Greetings for Chad and Dusty's Let's Like. Yes, the like is free indeed, and thank you very much for the £5 super chat.
If I can say something else here. Yeah, I think it is, again, if I can just say, it's a gross mischaracterization, I think, of the Black Manosphere as being a particular monolithic space that only discusses certain issues. I think our show, Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder, is evidence of that. My show, Thunder's Thoughts, is evidence of that. My car, Thunder Talks, is evidence of that. A number of streams that are put on by Dr. T.S.on Johnson, by Dr. Ronald Neal, and by others in the space. There are those that are more right-leaning, like let's see here, like Little Big Nate, and like Mumia Obsidian Ali, that says he's a Republican. Also O'Shea Duke Jackson, who says that he's more on the right. But then there are those that are independents, or I think Dr. T.S.on Johnson has said that he's been more of a Green Party kind of voting person. I have been a bit more libertarian, but have been independent for a long time. Also, I think there seemed to be a sort of belittling or bias against academics. Now, I have my own bias against academics and academia, and there's a lot of issues there. But there seemed to be a bias against the sort of thought leadership, thought capital associated with politics, and the issues related to Black men. And boys, there seemed to be a bias against that. I think that is absolutely necessary. I'll say this too: the reason that the female issues, the women issues, I think have thoroughly entrenched themselves in both political parties, is because they have been, part of discussions and part of, for 60 years. For 60 years. So you cannot expect the outcome of conversations happening in the Black Manosphere over maybe 10 years to have already developed the kind of results that 60 years of full media, 24/7, full media coverage and full embracing of women's issues and things by both political parties. You cannot expect it to bear that kind of fruit overnight, and so that shows you that I think that that it's a complete straw man to mischaracterize positions, to create the definitions of those definitions. I'm sorry, the definitions of those terms, and then to define what would be a win or a loss in the same breath. I think it's a bit disingenuous. I would rather that we just be able to just have open conversations and disagree on points rather than go the extra step. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. And I do hope that we have the opportunity to hash some of these things more out. What I do get from this at the end is not an open conversation, but rather a closed one. What do I mean by that? I'm like, okay, points. Like, okay, on this side, these are the facts that we have on the ground, right? Because it's always difficult when you have a political conversation that doesn't have borders for things to kind of spread out. So if you have a debate and it's like, okay, these are the policy points on this policy in this particular jurisdiction, XYZ, right? I think that thing would be useful in general in terms of hashing out some of these more practical aspects, if you will.
Yeah, perhaps I'll talk to Dr. Tiazan Johnson, perhaps, and reach out to him about doing one of these shows. I don't know what his schedule like is on Sundays at 4, but I'll reach out to him. I think he'd be a good resource and asset as far as listing some of those out.
Word them up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, again, 4 p.m. Eastern time, every Sunday. Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what draws behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.